Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right. Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Ryan Hawk to the podcast. Ryan is a keynote speaker. He's an author. He's an advisor. He's a host of the Learning Leader Show. He speaks often, right? You'll see his name all over the place. He speaks at Fortune 500 companies. He works with teams. He works with players. He's a former athlete, or maybe current athlete, but former college athlete, and but works with the NFL, NBA, NCAA. And he facilitates leadership circles, which are opportunities to offer some structured guidance and feedback to new and experienced leaders. And given our audience of up-and-coming or existing marketing and sales and go-to-market leaders, we thought Ryan would be a great addition to the show to get some perspective from that. So welcome, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I know that you've, I've read all about you and seen some of your stuff, and you've written a lot of bestsellers. You've hosted a lot of these. You've run a top podcast. So this is old hat for you. So I'm excited to put you on the other side and have you be a guest. You can tell us all about your story.
Me too. Thanks. It's fun to kind of chop it up with someone else who's doing some similar things, working with leaders, trying to help marketing leaders, sales leaders. That's right in my wheelhouse. For the first 12 years of my career, I was working in sales as a rep, manager, director, and then ultimately VP before I left corporate America. But yeah, that's right in my wheelhouse. So I speak at a lot of national sales meetings, so I feel really at home, especially around sales professionals and marketing professionals.
Awesome. Well, good. Yeah, I noticed that in your background, it kind of was like corporate sales, and then boom, this pivot to this influencer leadership hosting kind of world, which I think is pretty fascinating. So tell us your story. Tell us how that happened. Where did it come from? What drove you to make that change and leave corporate?
Yeah, backgrounds in sports, football, baseball, basketball in high school, college football player, and then played a little bit after college in the Arena Football League and very briefly in the CFL in Canada. Eventually, you get to the point where you have to decide if you want to keep chasing that dream. And then the sport tells you that you're going to retire because you're not good enough anymore. And that's what happened to me when I was in my mid-20s. And so I had to get a real job for the first time in my life because my whole life was focused on being as good of an athlete as I could be, which it did earn me a scholarship. And I learned a ton from athletics. and so I wouldn't give that up for anything. But I got a job in sales at a company called LexisNexis and was fortunate that it really, I think, benefited people who were willing to take their work ethic, which I learned again from athletics, and put that into the world of professional selling, and was able to do well enough at it to get promoted a few times. And along the way, after getting my MBA, I started my podcast, The Learning Leader Show, really as a form of just my own personal leadership PhD program. I wanted to continue learning beyond the formal education that I had received, and thought, well, could I choose my own professors and ask them exactly what I want? And that's now, Kelly, almost 10 years ago is when I started it. And 600 plus episodes later, it's my favorite thing in the world to do. And I did not intend for it to create a business or opportunities for me to speak and consult and advise and work with these leadership teams all over the country. But that's what I've gotten to do as a result of that. And I left corporate America after I was a VP of sales at a sister company of LexisNexis called Elsevier Clinical Solutions, and left in the end of 2017, and have been doing this ever since. So feel very lucky that I get to learn from brilliant people every day, and then share what I'm learning with other leaders throughout really the world. And this type of job didn't really exist when I was growing up. Podcaster, I guess there were authors, but to build a business off the back of a podcast was not even a thing. So now that's what I get to do, I feel super lucky and fortunate, and that's what drives me, I think, to work really hard at it. So I get to keep doing it. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna totally geek out on sports here for a sec. So
great.
So I have 3 kids, and we're a big sports family. So I have a junior in high school who's a running back. I have an 8th grader who plays. They go both ways in middle schools. He plays slot and outside linebacker. And then I have a 6th grade club volleyball and horse rider. But my junior in high school wants to play college football, right? So he's going through all the things. He's been highly successful this season. I think he'll get some opportunities. But trying to have a conversation with him. So I think about you at 25 years old or whenever the time was, about what life looks like after football is sort of a non-starter, right, in his head. Like, it's just football. It's football, right? It's all football all the time. And even like, well, do you want to, like, let's find the one where you get to play and get the best education. He's like, education, like, it's football, right? Like, he wants the best football program. How do you kind of gear that? Like, how do you make a decision about, like, when you went on to college, what did you think about what I'm going to do with my life? If you were thinking, okay, I'm going to go to NFL or Canadian Football League or whatever it happens to be and play football, how do you pick a degree? How do you pivot that into sales? Like, what does that sort of arc look like in that your brain as you make that transition? Or is it just, I'm going to be a competitor at one thing, I'm going to go be a competitor at the other thing, and sales is the closest thing to competing?
Yeah, it's really cool to talk about this. I did not think that far ahead. My parents are the best. They're my mentors in my life. They're still very close. I just celebrated my mom's 70th birthday this past weekend with her.
Happy birthday to your mom?
And my parents, they're everything. But they're also were very big on, they were there for us. They supported us. They created an amazing opportunity for us to grow up and be very competitive in sports. But they wanted us to figure life out. And so they really took a step back at a lot of times and let us make mistakes and didn't really push us to think beyond what we were doing. So especially my younger brother and I were both very myopically focused on sports. We did not even think about school. I went to school. I graduated with 3.1 GPA. I mean, I did okay. I didn't really care that much about academics, if I'm being honest with you, though. In college, I thought only about football. I didn't think about what I was going to do even going into my 5th year of college. All I thought about was playing and continuing to play, which was delusional because I was just like an average quarterback in college. I wasn't a great quarterback. I was average on an average team. So if you're an average quarterback on an average team, you're probably not going to get a ton of opportunities in the NFL, which I didn't. I had some workouts, but that was it. So I think what happens is kids don't want to listen to their parents anyway, even if they did try to tell them those things. And so one of my friends, Brooke Cups, who I co-wrote my most recent book with, he's really good about trying to find people that are other adult-ish to kind of place in their kids' lives to talk with them about stuff like that. Well, if you're getting, like, I was recruited by some Ivy League schools, and I was like, well, their football teams aren't good enough. Obviously, I wouldn't go there. And they don't give scholarships either. They don't give like football scholarships, so I obviously won't go there. Well, I probably should at least visited or at least considered that, because I would never have gotten into an Ivy League school without my football ability, and those could have gotten me into those schools because they'll, relent a little bit based on getting you in if you could play. So I didn't think anything like that. I didn't think post-football. I feel like most kids nowadays are smarter than me, though. I talk to high school kids a good amount, and they're like longer-term thinkers. They're considering, like, I just spoke with a D lineman who's friends with his dad, and he's a great, great kid, and he just visited Yale, and he wouldn't get in without football, but it's like he's probably going to go to play. And I'm like, man, you're setting yourself up for life. So it's almost like you need to find others beyond you that can play the mentor role for your kids. And I'm trying to do the same thing right now, but play the mentor role for your kids because they might be more apt to listen to them than their own mom and dad, which is weird. But you know how that's kind of how it goes, because you're with them all the time versus these other like really smart people who aren't with them all the time. So that's one tactic that I've been trying to use that, I don't know, maybe that could work. But I also don't think, Kelly, I think like it's great for a kid to be like myopically focused and trying to be as great as he can possibly be at whatever the thing he's choosing to do. Usually like that mindset, if it's portable, like that will lead to what happens after football, even if it's not like super planned. So in a way, I really like that people who have that type of commitment and desire and almost borderline obsession to be excellent at something, because usually it might be a little bit of a rocky transition because the football becomes your identity, and it was for me for sure. So it's a little bit rocky when it ends, but you eventually get through that, and then you use all of the lessons and the work ethic and the commitment and the drive and the focus. You can use that in whatever you choose to do next. And hopefully, you can figure that out. In my case, it was sales, and it worked really well. In others, it'll be different things. But I think in a way, I would rather that in somebody who is so obsessed and focused than someone who isn't as driven about anything and just kind of gets good grades and then eventually goes to college.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's right. I mean, it's the reason why we're big fans. My husband and I both played sports growing up, and so we're big fans of just all the character building and the effort and the hard work and the, Where
are you guys located?
Constant pursuit of perfection. We're in Lake Travis in Austin, Texas.
Okay, so you big time high school football there.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and they love it. But it's funny. I have two boys, and so I think about this, how this translates to what you just said. I have one who was born a decent athlete, but his passion and drive have made him great. He puts in a ton of work. He wakes up every day to be better than he was the day before. Like, he drives and drives. I have another kid who sort of came out of the womb a great athlete. So he's like, well, it's a good thing I can sleep till noon and get a big gulp and a burrito from 7-Eleven and call it a day. There's kind of like, it's a good thing I'm already awesome. And so I'm like, man, if I was hiring, so fast forward them 15 years, as you talk about, like, would I want the guy who's got natural talent, natural intelligence, less drive, or the one who's pretty good, who has so much passion, so much drive, is going to be excellent at whatever he does, even if it takes a lot of work. And it's funny to like parent those two, and also to look at like translate those skills into my team at work and say, who am I seeing who's going to have the bigger career here? Is it the one with the drive, or the one with just the natural intelligence, natural talent, natural whatever? Pretty interesting. I don't know if you've witnessed that.
I mean, yeah, I probably identify more with the latter, of having decent kind of God-given skill and ability. But I would attribute a lot of my work ethic, though, to my high school coaches, Bob Gregg and Ron Ullery, who are legends. And I think my parents made an intentional choice to move to where we moved here in Centerville, Ohio, when I was 6 years old. And it was because there's a legendary high school football coach. And so my dad was kind of thinking, well, Kirk Herbstreit was a quarterback at Centerville High School. So we thought, well, maybe that could be our kids growing up. And it's amazing that it kind of worked out that way. But I think that's another big part of it. I'm sure there's good coaching where you're at too, in that part of the country. It's one of the like hotbed for high school football. But I think that's everything, because those are your formative years. Those guys got a hold of me when I was 13 and a half, 14 years old, and kind of helped turn me into a man. I graduated at 18, and so that was like 4 huge years of learning to work and being pushed way beyond what I was comfortable with. So now, like, leaving that, no, I've done a lot of hard things, but nothing like that. Nothing. Yeah. And so they almost make other hard things seem easier because they pushed us so hard. And it also taught us the value of preparation and resilience and grit and responding when things don't go your way, because that happened every day. Yeah. And that's priceless. I mean, that truly is priceless. I want to bottle that up and give it to my kids. That's why I love sports. I mean, we'd probably get along great if we went on a double date, because we'd be talking about how to manufacture hardship for kids, especially when you do well financially, which I know you do. It is that you could make life very easy for them. They could have whatever they want, whatever they need, but that's not going to help raise gritty, tough, resilient kids. And so that's one of the topics that comes up all the time, is how do we manufacture hardship? And it's hard. And I think sports is one of the great ways to do that, because then your parents don't matter. Where you come from doesn't matter. The color of your skin doesn't matter. Boy or girl nothing matters. All that matters is, like, you got to perform and you got to respond when you fit. My daughter's a junior, the libero team captain of our high school volleyball team. And volleyball is an amazing team sport, as you know, with a daughter playing in club, because they could win the set and still lose 23 times. They win 25-23. What an awesome activity to prepare you for life, because you're having to respond from failure so much. I love that. I love it. That's hard. That's tough. You got to be tough to respond. You mess up, you got to right back to it. Like, you don't have any time to waste. You got to get right back to it. And you have your teammates that are depending on you. And volleyball is a complete team sport, because if she doesn't pass the ball or dig it, they can't set it and spike it. So like you got to do those things. So to me, I wish there were more options, but sports is definitely one of the best.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's been a gift for sure, and I think that's awesome that you were raised that way. And some of those strong leaders you were talking about at the beginning, having outside voices, probably turned out to be some of your coaches. Is it's what I'm seeing. With my son, like his running back coach, his offensive coordinator, those are the guys who are pouring into him every day. Another voice outside of my husband. Spending
more time with them than you are, probably. I mean, and the kids definitely, they're invested. He wants to be great. Like it's such a pivotal role in a kid's life, is if they play a sport, is the head coach and assistant coaches, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. So let's switch a little bit. So since you've been in this world, in your the last 10 years, sounds like you've interviewed a ton of folks, I'm sure. Some of the best, some of the brightest. I've read some of the names that you've interviewed: Simon Sinek, Jim Collins, Tony Robbins, all these kind of folks. What are some of the most common traits you see in some of those highly successful leaders that you think, like, if you're gonna strip out like the key learnings of the best, what would you pass on and say, if you emulate these, this is probably a good path?
I would probably start with curiosity. I think they have a wonder about the world. They're constant learners. They're striving to go to bed a little bit wiser than they were when they woke up, which stems from the Charlie Munger quote. So I'd say very curious, super thoughtful, which goes hand in hand with curiosity. And then they're very intentional people. They don't wander through the world with their fingers crossed, hoping for the best. They have a purpose behind what they do, and they're intentional with their actions. Nothing really happens by accident. They're people who make things happen. They have a bias for action versus the learner who just kind of reads books and takes notes and sits in the corner but doesn't ever do anything. And so I think you got to be a doer, and you got to do it with intention, and that also starts with curiosity. So they're always striving to improve. Very growth-focused people. Again, intentional about how they're improving, and those types also are regularly pushing their edges, meaning, we all have this kind of sphere of comfort and competency, like we're this level of intelligence and this level of comfortable in certain settings, and they are banging on those walls on a daily basis to be wiser, right? To be more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And that's both physically and mentally. And I think, if you're thinking about that consciously and intentionally every day, you're really creating a forcing function to be better tomorrow than you were today, as you said your son is. And one of the things I can confidently say, especially for like all the clients I work with, is, we're going to work together for a long time, hopefully many years. The good thing is that I've created forcing functions in my life to ensure I'm going to be better tomorrow than I am today. I'm going to be much better 6 months from now than I am today, a year from now than I am today. That's just how I've designed my life, through talking with brilliant people, through having a writing practice where that forces to get it forces clarity in my mind because I'm getting the thoughts out of my head onto the page. And I'm surrounding myself with brilliant people too. And so all of those things hopefully will put me in a much better position. So whatever you think of me today, me and the members of my team, we will be much better as we progress. And that's what we can promise to the people we work with. So I try my best to learn from all those brilliant people, and then take bits and pieces from all of them and kind of mash it together with my personality, and hopefully I'm better for it. And then hopefully the people I work with are better for it, because teaching and sharing is a huge element of my business. It's basically what I do for a living. So yeah, I would say those are the first few things that come to mind of commonalities of those leaders who've sustained excellence.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wrote them down because I think that's really helpful insights to kind of think about emulating. I love it. Mm-hmm. Have you heard through them the reverse, things that you would or should or recommend others to stop doing in order to be more productive, more impactful, more influential, more fulfilled?
Well, it's like we've all probably had a boss like this if you worked long enough. And that boss is, and I have one that's this thought bubble in my head right now. I won't say his name, but they're the ones who already know everything. They don't need to read any books. They don't really need to build relationships with people. They've already got it all figured out. They have all the answers. They have their own little thing that they do, and that's that, right? Very fixed mindset type of people. So, yeah, I would say basically what not to do is the opposite of that. Like, they're not curious. They're not very thoughtful. They just kind of go through their same motions every day. And, maybe they have a style that could work temporarily for things. Maybe they have some talent for whatever. But that's like the anti-learning leader. I mean, to me, those aren't very enjoyable people to be around. They're not motivating or inspiring to me. You notice, it's funny, I interviewed a guy named Scott Belsky who now runs Adobe. His company got acquired by them many years ago, and he's grown within the organization. And I said, what do you look for when you hire a leader? Because now he's leading thousands and thousands of people. And he says, I look for somebody who's more interesting each time I talk to them. I'm like, oh, I had never thought of it that way. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, these are the ones who are constantly doing stuff, right? Running experiments, meeting amazing people, traveling, like doing stuff. They're more interesting each time I talk with them because they're doers, right? And I think that's a great way to think of it is like, even if they're like reading books, watching movies, again, going to cool events, traveling, whatever it may be, it's that they're learning, they're getting better, they're improving, and they're also probably good communicators. I think that's a really important skill for leaders to develop because that they're having to share what they've done, which then makes them interesting. So I kind of like thinking of it that way. And the anti is the person who is less interesting each time you talk to them. They're not really doing anything. You're like, so what have you been up to? Nothing. That's really exciting, so I think that's, yeah, I mean, those are some of the things I think about of the, the ones that you want to be with versus the ones that you probably don't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think about how that could apply to marketers. So with your background, so you spent 12 years, I think, in corporate America and sales, yep. Led a large sales division. So you worked closely as a seller probably, or a sales leader with marketers and marketing leaders. Before we go into kind of the leadership side of how that applies, but in those two things, in those two organizations working together, what have you seen that works the best to help build a strong relationship between sales and marketing?
Yeah, because I've also worked where the relationship isn't good. I'm sure you've seen this, where the salespeople are like, they don't do anything, and the marketing people say, oh, I don't like those guys or whatever. So one of my favorite marketing partners, Anna Clark, I remember working with her at LexisNexis because she always brought new and cool ideas. Not all of them were great ideas, but ideas are a quantity game. Like most things, it's like writing a book. Like you got to get all of it out and then cut the stuff that isn't good, which is usually the majority. So she thought of it, I remember, as like my job is to be a value-added resource to our sales organization and always come up with new ideas, promotions, things that we could do. And so we collaborated extremely. I looked at her as another sales leader for me, and I regularly would have her speak with my team. I would really pump her up and share with my team as to say, look, this is an amazing partner we have, and it is stupid to not really engage and have good collaboration back and forth. Because you know how some salespeople can be, which I was probably earlier in my career, which is like, just let me do my thing, right? And like, if you can create some promos, great, or whatever. And that was, I remember my dad sat me down when I was kind of being arrogant about partnering with marketing and not being very like helpful or not being a very good partner. And he's like, what are you doing? Think about this. You have like this free, brilliant resource, a full team of them, and you're trying to act like this alpha like wolf who needs to like not work with the group and just do your own thing. That makes no sense. And it was helpful for me to get that kind of nudge to say, yeah, you have a great, they cost you nothing, me. I mean, I worked at a company, right? They cost the company something. They didn't cost me anything. And so I remember that helped me to be better about being more open to collaborating and working with partners, because I think the people who ended up being the best of the best, they worked extremely well with all of the partners in the business, as opposed to thinking they were the tough guy who just could do it by themselves. It actually made no sense when you think of it. My dad used to say, when people would come up on stage and he would give them a hug for winning President's Club or Circle of Excellence, you don't get any extra credit because you didn't use your partners. In fact, you're stupid if you didn't use your partners. And so I think that's something that I had to learn as I became a little bit more mature. And now I think it's vital to have good relationships with your partners, especially your marketing partner, and hopefully that that goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think another probably connection that you learn in sports right there, right, is that don't, as a quarterback, like you don't get to, you can't win the game on your own, right? You need the offensive line more than anything. You need your receivers who can catch. You need, you need all the things. And I think that's that part, right? You can't be a hero on your own. Sales and marketing is a team sport for sure. We certainly in marketing can't close a lot of revenue, so we need our sellers to take the opportunities that we pass their way and close them. They need us to pass things their way. We need to all be aligned around the same strategy and audience and target accounts and all the things. So yeah, I think that's a great call. Yeah, I mean, winning on your own is it's not really feasible.
No, it's not. I mean, again, it's another. You asked about like commonalities of best of the best. I mean, that's another thing. They're so good about working with others. Like they understand whether it's hiring or partnering or collaborating with others. Like they know, even like Elon Musk, who obviously gets criticized a lot, but has you'd have to think especially with SpaceX, there are some brilliant people working at SpaceX that they are able to come together and create all the stuff that they're doing with rockets and satellites and all that. Like that happens because of partnering and collaborating with brilliant people. So I think there are examples everywhere of those who are sustaining excellence. It usually involves being good at working with other people.
Yeah, and that probably also falls counter to what you were talking about, working for a leader. I've worked for a few of the ones you mentioned that are that already sort of know everything. They don't need to collaborate with anyone because they already have it figured out. They already know what the right answer is. So that's also sort of that showing that antithesis that that working well with others is also probably in the same spirit of continually learning, continually being curious, continually being open to ideas, continually having that growth mindset. If you're working with people, you're trying bias for action and trying to put that into results. So I love that. I think that's a great connection point there too. Yeah. If you were going to give any advice, so after meeting with all these kind of leaders and your own experience, any advice you would give to maybe future CMOs, current CMOs, future CMOs, marketing leaders, to kind of future-proof their leadership, given the world that we're in right now. So I work in SaaS. The marketing landscape has changed like 180 every 2 years, like from what it was, back when I started in the software business in the mid 2010s, 15s, now all the way to 24. It's a completely different world. So what kind of advice would you give a leader in that space?
How is it different? I'm curious, genuinely curious. Like, how's it different?
Yeah. I mean, I think the world. So when I started my marketing career, first of all, I was like, the agency was trying to convince me to put money towards digital. I'm like, no, that's a waste of money. We're going to do it all on billboards and magazines and TV. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, like, so media, of course, has shifted. The outbound inbound game has shifted quite a bit. We've moved from the inbound engine worked for years, sort of like as long as you optimized Google, organic and paid, you could get kind of all the traffic. People have now gotten smarter. I think cookies are smarter, algorithms are smarter, sponsored ads are smarter. Like there's a lot of things that have kind of caused those results to not drive the quality of traffic that you would want before. I think cookieless, which has not happened yet, I think is changing the way that people interact with content. I think people like the world of like we used to be able to gate content and you would put in your stuff, you start a lead, you'd have a path. Now, no one wants to be gated. They don't want to be remarketed to. They don't want any of that. So people are just smarter to go around. So now we ungate content and we measure intent. It's just kind of chasing, moving, I think, ball a little bit. I think the way that social has evolved. Social used to not be such a powerful platform. Now it's more powerful, but now it's also, you can manufacture it quite a bit more too with influencers or with third parties, with paid, with in-mails, with all kinds of things. So it's just a constant game where we're always just trying to figure out who's in market for my product. What's the message that would resonate with them? Where are they in their journey? Who else is in their buying group? How do we get them to make a decision? And trying to figure out all those parts. It used to be a handful of tools. Now there's thousands of tools to do that. Figuring out the right connection points, figuring out the right data, getting as efficient as possible, folding AI into that. How does AI work in terms of automated workflows versus things you want to do manually? And so it's awesome because, to your point, like that curiosity and interest in new direction, new technologies, new trends is certainly a big one because marketing, I think it's changing all the time. But you can certainly figure out the marketing leaders who have sort of embraced the new stuff versus have kind of hung on to the old.
Okay. That's helpful. So I would say, and this goes beyond future CMOs or current ones, but if that's the industry you've chosen, whatever industry you've chosen, but in this case, for that channel, I think hopefully it's something that you genuinely are interested in and care about. And that's the only way I think you could become an expert in that thing, which I think you need to be. If you work in sales, you should become an expert. If you work in marketing, you should become an expert. Like, you got to know this stuff. You have to, I think, be willing and able to be adaptable. I met with a mentor of mine named Lee Rivas, he's a CEO now, but Lee went to West Point. He then was a tank commander. And then after he got done doing all of that, he was a consultant. And then he went to Harvard Business School, literally a perfect resume. And so I'd regularly meet with him all the time. And he would say one of the number one skills you need to develop is to be adaptable, which you're sharing how you are right now, right? This is how it was. This is how it is now. And being adaptable is then understanding the changes in the landscape, knowing that it's always going to be changing. So you have to be more forward looking. And I think the third part I would say is I would try to find a community of the most forward-thinking people in your industry and make that like a mastermind group, or go to conferences with them, or regularly have Zooms with them, whatever you got to do. I have found the power of meeting with groups of leaders to be life-changing for me. I meet with my Learning Leader Circle members every month, and then we meet in person at least once per year. And that has changed my life as far as being surrounded by people that push my edges, and I try to do the same for them. And so if I was trying to be really good as a CMO or a future one, I think one of the best ways to learn about the future of the industry and to understand what's happening is to surround yourself with others who are excellent at it currently, and they're also trying to grow and improve, and regularly meeting with those people so that you can always kind of stay on top of what's happening, where it's headed, what's changed, what have people tried. We share at the beginning of each of our calls like new things you've tried, and yeah, some of them don't apply, but a lot of them do. And so I never thought of it that way, or even a hiring practice or whatever, even just a simple interview question that maybe somebody tried and it really helped. Like little things like that can lead to big things. So if you're regularly meeting with others who are experts in your industry, I think that's super helpful, because again, like that, I've learned firsthand, one of the best ways to improve or to create a forcing function to get better is to be talking with people who are wiser than you on a regular basis. And I certainly do that. And I wish I started earlier. I was too immature, but I'm glad I've been doing it now for a decade, and it's been very helpful. So that's the advice I'd give, not only to CMO, future CMO, but really to anybody, regardless of whatever the industry is that you choose.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good idea. We have a forum starting in a couple weeks called CXO Unfiltered. It's for sales and marketing leaders to
awesome.
and share ideas and whatever. So I love that idea of starting with things you've tried. What new thing have you tried? How did it work? Was it successful? And yeah, it could be as simple as, a new interview question to find, great sellers, or it could be some new tech. We just signed on a new AI platform and we're trying to figure out how that's going to work. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said earlier, which I'm just going to double click into because I think it's fascinating. I've written 2 books. I think you've written 3, or I've read about 3. There might be more. I don't know. And people always ask me, like, how do you start? Like, what's that process look like? How do you get going? How do you publish a book? And you talked about like having, a few minutes ago, you talked about like kind of throwing up a bunch of ideas and kind of putting it all pen to paper, and then you end up trimming it down before you go. Tell me about whether it's, a general version of all 3, or maybe the stories of one of your books. How did it go? What gave you the idea? How did you start it? How did you run it? Just to kind of bring it to ground for folks.
Well, I'm a big believer, as we've talked about, in coaching and hiring coaches. So I've had writing coaches for all 3 of my books, in addition to editors and copy editors, like all this stuff. So I usually spend the entire book advance to make the book as excellent as it can be on coaches and editing and all of that stuff. So I'm a big believer in hiring coaches. One of them is a former prosecutor, and he is a specialist at making an argument, right? He put away killers, literally, that was his job for many years. And so he has to be persuasive. So he helps shape my writing to become more persuasive. And usually my coaches are prompt driven, meaning I think there's something about, like, let's say somebody sends you an email with a question or 2 and you just respond to the email. That's like when we're speaking in our own voice as much as possible. You know what I mean? You're just kind of typing what you think in your head. And that's usually the best. It's like the best form, at least for me, of how I write. So that's how, like, I've written my books, where I'm supplied a bunch of prompts like every day, and then I'm responding to these prompts, and then we're expanding and we're adding stories, and we're adding some of the science and research as well. And I have help with research guys to help me with that too, that I've hired. So I'm just a big believer in doing it like as a team. Now I'm the author, and everything is like it's in my name, and I'm the one who's writing every word, but I get help in the construction of it. But the books start as just a bunch of notes and thoughts and ideas, and then they get trimmed down, and then we mix in all of the prompts and my responses to those prompts, and then we have to figure out the best way to structure it. It's really a mess. I think it's a mess. The reason, though, one of the reasons to write books, I think selfishly, is because it really helps me learn. My first one's called Welcome to Management. It's really just about like that jump from individual contributor to first-time manager. And I had done one-offs, interviews, written essays, talked to people, tons of emails, but hadn't really figured out like a structured way to help people make that leap. And so I think, again, selfishly, I don't know if you feel that way too, but selfishly, it's just, again, another forcing function to learn and get really clear on what I believe about a topic. So that's what I would say is I think when in doubt, hire people to help you make it as good as it could be, because books are artifacts that live forever. And I want I want to be very proud of them. I want them to be very useful, and I want them to help people. And so it's more about making them excellent than it is about like making money off of them. Because if I make that excellent, then the result is I'll probably end up making all that money back. And so it kind of works itself out. But that's how I've done it, and that's how I'll probably do it again in the future.
Yeah.
How have you done it? Like, what's been your structure, your style to do it?
Not that, but I like that approach. Mine wasn't quite as planned, but I don't think I set out to like write. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing when I did it. I had hit like a burnout spot in my career, and I left a company and decided to take 6 months off. And it was after my second CMO gig. So I'd had 2 CMO gigs, and I was like, I need a break. I took 6 months. And it was during the school year, so my kids would leave every day, and I just wrote. And I just started kind of writing my story. I was writing like lessons learned. I was writing themes I extracted. I was writing kind of like horror stories, great leaders, bad leaders, written kind of all the stuff. And so I finished it at the ended up taking like 2 years to come out, but I wrote it in about 4 months. And then I went back to work full time. And so it kind of got stuck in a Google Drive for a while whenever I'd get to it. But basically, I wrote it, and then I finally, after all of it, I had my mom was an English teacher. I had her copy edit it and make sure it was good. I had a content editor. I actually hired somebody to kind of go through and make sure The framing was good. I did all that. But then when I took it to a publisher, they were like, I don't remember now, like the metrics are off. I think it was like 75,000 words. And they were like,
Oof.
this is great. This is about twice as long as a book should be. And I was like, oh, they were like, it needs to be like 35, 40. And so we figured out a way to kind of cut it in half, basically.
Wow.
Because I'd written the whole thing kind of sequentially. Then I realized that like no one actually cares about like my story sequentially. So instead I need to kind of flip it to themes and narratives and whatever. And so when I restructured it, then I had sort of more of like a kind of personal tragedy growth situation. And then I had this professional learnings one. And I was like, I'm going to start with the personal one that feels a little less vulnerable. So I ended up publishing that half of the book. And I did that. And so then I had to find, and then they helped me, and then they did another copy edit and all that good stuff. And then they published it for me. I feel like the publishing part probably should be easy and I could do it myself. I just haven't learned how to do that. And so I ended up paying somebody to do it the first time. And then the second one I co-wrote it with my chief sales officer. We did a book on sales and marketing alignment, and it was called Yes, It's Your Fault. And we wrote it together. And basically what we did was we worked with a ghostwriter, and we just kind of threw up all of these things that caused tension, areas where we learned to work together, areas where we struggled, whatever, for like an entire day. And she just took stories, and then we sort of did a chapter a week of editing after that. So she helped us kind of take all of our combined thoughts into one book. So one I wrote myself, one was more personal, and then one was a bit more businessy. And
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Isn't it an amazing tool for clarity? I just feel like you don't fully know what you think about something until you try to write about it. And that's why I think I push all leaders I work with we create some sort of a writing practice, even if it's just like personal private journaling that I'll never read, but they will. Whatever it is, I think all leaders should have some sort of a writing practice. Doesn't have to be crazy long, but document your days, document your thoughts, like just have people supply you with prompts, maybe of things that you do on a regular basis, and just write it out. I think that is I don't fully know what I think about something until I try to write it down. And I think that's just a really useful tool for all leaders we all need to be more clear. And so I think that is maybe the best exercise for becoming a clear thinker.
I agree with that. I also think that it helped for me because I was coming off of this super toxic work situation. It was like therapy for me to write it and to put it into words and to kind of like put like just a word to my thoughts, like things that are sort of spinning around here, to actually put pen to paper on them. All of a sudden, like I was like, once it was out, it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, like I feel like that one's gone now. Like I was able to kind of, come to peace with that and move on. But to your point, like when I rewrote the book or reframed it, it forced me to figure out the so what of my sort of like data dump into a computer. Like all of a sudden was like, oh wait, no, there was a lesson in this. Let me like re-look at this collection of stories, and actually the extracted story is, this aha moment that I had in my career. And so it definitely forces the clarity. It forces sort of my list of like 10 things I care about, like, things I've learned in leadership, things I'll never do again, like that you just don't do when you're living life day to day. So it was a really powerful process. I loved it. I'd love to do it again. It was I loved like when I'd get like 3 straight hours to work, I'd be like, oh, I just get to write today. And I just
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I feel like it's such a messy and long process that the days, I think you got to get it out, right? You got to get the words out. But the days where you're like, oh, this is good. Yeah. When you start stacking some of those days, because I definitely have the days where I go, this is not that good. But you just got to keep going. You just got to keep at it. And then you have some of those days and you string some together. And before you know it, it's like, this might be good. This might be useful for people. If we clean it up a little bit, I just feel like that is a very energizing thought. But it's weird as an author too, though. Somebody else had told me this at one point, and I think it's true. Like writing a book is like a stand-up comic telling a joke and having to wait 2 years to see if people laugh. Like that's literally what it is. Like you don't know the impact it's going to have on other people for a while. And so you have to be a master at delayed gratification. You have to be okay with it, which is another important skill to develop, I think, for all people, probably especially young people, right? With the instancy of the world as it is to now with Uber, DoorDash, everything that is, you could get whatever you want basically immediately. Book writing is the ultimate test of delaying gratification.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And then you end up realizing that you're kind of writing it at the end of the day for, at least for me, because I haven't written that many, but I was writing it for myself, and I had to be like, okay, sure. At some point, this is not about how, I want them to consume it and get value, and that's a plus. But I also have to be really proud of the work on its own, because I don't have that gratification to know if it's resonating or not. So I have to just feel good independently of the work.
Yep. They're so personal, and it has to be, I think, for you, just again, because you just don't know. Once it's out there. You can try to market it and sell it, and we do all those things, but ultimately, I do think writing becomes a very personal thing, and it's got to be for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, cool. I know we're running long, so I will. I'll wrap us up here. Before you go, any fun fact about you that we haven't talked about that people should know or don't know, maybe shouldn't know?
I don't know. We've talked about a lot of them. Sports background, dad, and 5 daughters that I'm trying to lead and be good,
you
productive.
Have 5 daughters?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a fun fact right there. That's daughters.
And it's obviously chaotic, as you would expect, but also the coolest thing ever. So trying to do my best to lead by example, right? Live by my values. And it's been fun. It's like a roller coaster, but it's been good.
I have one, and she's harder than I had 4 more boys. So I can't imagine.
How old is she?
She's 12.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
nice.
There's
club volleyball, and you said she rides horses too?
And she rides horses, yeah.
Interesting. That's cool. Yeah. What a cool mix. I haven't heard that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's what she loves. So so she chose not the 2 cheapest sports in the world. But
do you have a horse? I don't know how it's set up down there in Texas.
Yeah, we lease a horse. So she has unlimited access to a horse that someone else cares for.
Perfect.
And then somebody else feeds and boards and whatever it, and then we just lease it. It's like a boat. We just turn it in at the end of our shift.
Perfect setup. I love it. Love it. Yep.
Well, cool. Well, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to follow you, is there a place they should go to find you?
Sure. Learningleader.com. That's the home base for everything. My podcast called The Learning Leader Show, but my books, everything can be found at learningleader.com. So I'll try to put everything there. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. You can check out Ryan Huck at learningleader.com. Check it out. And we will see all of you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast.